Hello and welcome to the Gameweek 24 edition of the FPL Scope podcast. I am your host Matthias and I have activated my assistant manager chip not in FPL but in the FPL Scope podcast, and my assistant manager is none other than Kevin Nisanka, who's always here as my co-host on this podcast. And I'm wondering, just straight off the top, I know what you've done with your transfers, but are you going to activate the assistant manager chip on David Moyes for the double game week as it stands?
Potentially. Potentially. I think it'd be quite fun, especially if we beat Liverpool as well. It would be a real bonus because obviously they are uh, more than five places
Yeah,
above us.
definitely.
So, the question remains, will I do it? Because I think that Leicester can get a hiding and stuff like that. So, I mean, the bottom line of do I believe in Everton and Moyes? Yes. Is this the most optimal time to do it? Maybe, but the issue becomes then also there are other double game weeks that I can target and other teams that I can target too. Whilst I think Everton is the best choice for this double game week, obviously. Yes, I mean, I believe that they are. It just comes down to what chip I'll use when, because I obviously still have my free hit, I still have my wild card, all types of different things. So a lot of these things go into consideration, but I'm very tempted, to say the least.
Fair enough. We'll get more into that as well as we go along in the podcasts. We're also going to go just straight to your team, the score you had from this past game week. We're also going to talk about NDIA, who was on the front cover because he is someone that might have been brought into your team, or spoilers, he has been brought into your team. You have jumped on off the fence in that regard at least, and go with him. When it comes to your Gameweek 23 score, you did 3 transfers. Two of them worked out pretty well. Fernandes to Mbeumo. Fernandes got 3 points. Mbeumo got 7 points. So that gained you some points. Wood to Gakpo. Wood got 2 points. Gakpo got 16 points. That gained you 14 points. Amazing. And then finally, Joe Pedro to Calvert-Lewin, who got injured. And then they got a penalty that NDIA scored instead. So looking back at your game week and the 3 transfers, like how do you feel it went in general? And what do you feel about the Calvert-Lewin thing? Like how annoying is that to see him get injured like straight away when you just brought him in?
Yeah, a bit frustrating, and I think he was always due an injury, which is like a weird thing to say about someone, considering the fact that he's been healthy for so long and blanking, and then all of a sudden when I bring him in, he just goes breaks. So a bit frustrating in that regard, especially I brought him in with the hopes that he might score against Brighton, and he would have if he was still on the pitch to take the penalty. And I reckon we would have looked better with him on the pitch as well. And we did look good when he was on the pitch, just generally speaking. So frustrating, but at the very least, I feel a bit justified in what happened, considering how the game played out, and we ended up winning. So a bit, annoying in all things considered, but considering the fact that I brought Brian Mbeumo in, who scored a penalty and got to retake a penalty, it sort of feels like, you win some, you lose some.
Yeah.
Gakpo going absolutely insane. The fact that I got the Chris Wood thing right, because a lot of people ridiculed me for getting rid of Chris Wood, and I had a feeling Bournemouth would win.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't think they'd win as crazily as they did. But that being said, I think, it just was a good week. 70 points in total. A lot of players getting returns. Palmer Classic doesn't show up in a big game.
Yeah.
Bit annoying about Hull because I was contemplating playing Mikolenko as well, but I was just like, oh my god, that feels like a proper jinx if I play all of them against Brighton. Brighton aren't the worst, but they are the worst at the Amex, which is fun to see. So a huge win for us. Really annoyed about Robinson as well because Fulham were definitely in the game for the longest time and then conceded quite late. So a bit frustrating with all that. Also, TAA was due for a crazy amount of points as well because he had gone the assist. He had the clean sheet until the 90 something minute
Mm-hmm.
when they randomly scored. So yeah, I mean, I can't like I always say 60 is my target, so 70 is a pretty decent week considering the fact that I technically missed with Salah because he suck or Gakpo could have been a better captaincy choice, but that's hindsight. We knew to target Ipswich, and yeah, just annoying that they conceded when they did, and also Salah losing out on points and all this type of stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
A bit frustrating, but he's still the Egyptian king and all this type of stuff. So fair enough. I can't really get too angry about the score. Gordon got an assist as well. If I'm yeah,
Yep.
Gordon got an
5
assist,
points.
and um, yeah, generally speaking, pretty decent. Really, I mean. I knew starting Henderson or Verbruggen, they're gonna get similar points because I wanted an Everton win, and I expected Crystal Palace to lose
Brentford.
to Brentford. Yeah, and I think it was. I mean, I never was hesitating in starting, and Bomo definitely hesitated with Sar. Um, so yeah, it's just it's a shame I couldn't get more points, but 70s again, decent score.
Yep. 70 points is really good, I think, in general. Yeah, this week as well was a bit of a low-scoring game week, so it's definitely really nice. We'll see the manager of the week soon and how many points they got as well. There's also, just to note, you're not seeing wrong on the graphics, there are now 5 chips because we have added the assistant manager chip, the Ass.Man chip. So that has also been added to the chips remaining. So now we have 3 chips remaining. It's a wildcard, free hit, and then the assistant manager chip. So yeah, that's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen in the future and how people are going to use that chip as well, since it's completely new to the game. But we'll get more into that later on in the podcast. Let's move on to Kimo's score from this past game week. He got 10 points less than you with 60. He made 0 transfers, didn't bring in a single Liverpool player, which is interesting because he only has Salah. Salah captain, 16 points. Isak, 13 points, as most people have. He also had Gordon, like you, with the 5 points. He had 5 points from Watkins, who got an assist against West Ham, 6 points from Kirkus, and 7 points from Gabriel in the starting lineup. So, yeah, what do you feel about Kimo's tactics? He had 2 free transfers before this game week. Didn't use any of them and ended up with 60 points. So, how do you feel Kimo did and anything he could have done differently as well?
Again, I think it was a bit strange to bench Embuemo. I mean, as Embuemo, person myself, and as well, you might have discussed in a different video, you had Embuemo as well. So it's
Yep.
one of those things where classic him benching someone who does something of note, and quite a decent bench from the looks of it, considering he could have gone 20 points if he had done a bench boost. I think
Yeah.
so. Quite funny. I mean, obviously, Bednarik just randomly scored again
Yeah.
on his bench. So, yeah, I think that's maybe the one thing I would have said to maybe find a way to facilitate Emblemo. I get starting Chris Wood. Get starting Watkins because we gave him so much flack for benching him a week ago and all this type of stuff. So, yeah, but I think you could have benched Rogers for Emblemo. I mean, Rogers was very close to scoring.
West Ham at home.
Yeah, I guess it was West Ham at home, but how did that go for Aston Villa?
Yeah.
So
Still.
I think I
From
think
like
that's
the
only
first
thing
like 15 minutes of that game, I thought it was going to be like 4-0 Aston Villa, but then they just turned off for some reason and stopped playing after the
yeah.
goal.
Yeah, so I would have maybe argued that that's maybe the one thing I would have done. I don't blame him for the Mikalenko benching because Brighton did come close, quite especially the last what was it 19 minutes because it was like the last 10 and then they gave like a crazy amount of extra time if I remember correctly. It was pretty fucking nervy and I was like refreshing live score because I'm like my heart can't take seeing it on TV. So I was just like, please stay full time. And yeah, so I understand that. And Bednark, you're not gonna start him. So
No.
that's unfair. But I think Abramo he should have probably started. But besides that, I think a bit risky with not going for Liverpool players. But I'm assuming if he didn't do any transfers, that means he has 3 transfers for
3
this week.
transfers. Yep.
Yeah, he's gonna 100% bring in a bunch of Liverpool players. So
Yeah, we'll get to that eventually because in the plans I have a couple of different ways of him getting Liverpool players. So we'll definitely discuss that later. But yeah, 60 points, not too bad, especially when you made zero transfers, Kimo. So yeah, we'll see what happens in the future. He's still ahead of me. I think he's right behind you. So it's really close between the three of us in our own mini league, but it's really close between all three of us. So that's interesting to see going into the end of the season. So yeah, that was you with 70 points, Kimo with 60 points. Now let's check out who got the most points in the FPL Scope mini league this week. And that was the manager of the week with only 84 points. That is the correct score. 84 points, not too much actually. 15 of them coming from Martinez in defense, which is interesting because he scored that really kind of, I would say, fluky goal against Fulham. A really crazy shot that just went in. So 15 points from him, 8 points from Guardiola, who I want to talk about more later on in the podcast as well when we talk about the future plans for this manager. But he was crazy in the City-Chelsea game. Like he played as like a attacker almost. It was kind of crazy to watch, but he got one goal from that. He had like 3 big chances and got 1 goal from it. 8 points from him. Other than that, he started Mbeumo, this manager, or she, I don't know, SMC. I don't know if that's a guy or a girl. Joe Pedro on the bench, obviously, with 1 point, so easy benching there because Pedro has been terrible lately. Semenyo with 9 points. Kind of surprised not to see anyone else atop the leaderboards in terms of manager of the week with either Semenyo or either Kluivert or Dango for sure as well. But yeah, those are really, or at least Dango is really not that popular in FPL in general. But yeah, 84 points, 0 transfers used, all chips remaining as well. Is looking pretty good for this team. But what do you think about the team in general and not just this game week with 84 points? Like any weak points, anything you think should change? Like what are your first impression of this team?
I mean, I think the lack of Everton and Liverpool players could bite them in the ass. So I would recommend some transfers there, especially like Cole could easily be Mikolenko just straight up, and small things like that. I'd consider Konate as well as another easy Liverpool asset, potentially Gakpo instead of Wood. These sort of things is what I would look into. And Paul Pedro has really not done enough lately. Like he is very penalty dependent to a fault, I'd say. So yeah, it's a bit strange. But it'd be classic him to just hit a run of form and then start scoring again. But I think that would be my suggestion. I think would be to shore up the team a little bit. But I like a lot of these picks. I think Semenyo has been super unlucky not to be more involved in these crazy scores. And yeah, it was like a nice little spinneroonie that he did. And he got the goal very late, if not the final
super
goal
late,
or
the
something
final goal,
like that.
5-0.
So it's a bit alarming in that sense, but I think Semenyo is a good pick, but I would go with Kluivert simply because he's on penalties and they're roughly the same price, or even Otara in the sense that Dango, I believe, is their striker now.
Yeah.
And he's listed in midfield, so yeah, I don't know. I feel like Semenyo's sort of been one of those random underperforms in the matches you expect him to go crazy in, and then like will score against United and like all this type of thing. So he's very hit and miss. But other than that, I think the team's great. I like the Mbeumo pick. Obviously, I like Gordon because he's starting to proper hit some consistency. He's like so obviously great. Guardiola unbelievably attacking in the game. Like to me, I'm like he could have had a hat trick if he was like a proper striker.
Definitely.
Because even that one finish, the one where he gets like on his chest and like turns into Messi and all this type of things. Like I was just like, oh, he can easily score here if he gets the right finish, but then slices it. But very encouraging to see. It's sort of similar for anyone who owns Munoz of Crystal Palace. He does the same sort of thing. He just bombs into the box, and you're just like, wait, this guy's a center back. Why is he playing like a prime Gerard Piqué, who used to do that all the time as well, like an asshole? But yeah, very encouraging stuff. Obviously, the Martinez thing is just absolutely insane. And very, yeah, he's been getting the goals and assists lately, which is wild. So he's been one of,
Sneaky
I think, in this 3-5-2, you know, insistence by Amorim. He's been one of their best performers, so fair enough.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about Joe Pedro, actually, because you mentioned him, because he played against Everton, which is obviously your favorite team. So this was one of the first games where he played next to or behind Welbeck. So how did he look in that game? Like, did he still look as like non-threatening as he has been in the past, or does he look more back to himself now that he's playing in his favorite role? Like, what did you see from that game?
I mean, I would say that it was like encouraging aspects to his game, comparatively. But I guess when you meet a big James Tarkowski, it's impossible. But no, I, it, it's hard to say. I personally thought he was a bit average in the game, but I also think that Everton's defense was playing very good. So it might have just been that it was the wrong matchup for him to go crazy. But considering the fact that, what was it against in the reverse, if we just double check, just give me a second, because I feel like he sort of went, didn't he?
Scored a lot of goals in the opposite fixture.
Yeah, like didn't no, he blanked against us as well actually. So he's blanked in both games. Um, yeah, he's one of those weird picks because he is good. I still think he has the ability, and hilariously, what he had. What was it that he did? He scored against like Villa away, then scored against
Man
Arsenal in a
City.
very
Goal and assist against Man City off the bench is when everyone like was like buying him and stuff.
yeah, which was what, game week 11,
And then goal and assist against
scored.
Bournemouth as well after that. They beat
Yeah.
City and Bournemouth in 2 games in a row, Brighton.
Yeah, and then they were dog shit
Yeah,
for like
terrible for a
7,
long time.
and then they had to meet the mighty Everton to start losing again. So it's one of those. They're so strange, and
Yeah.
given the fact that they're playing both, I believe it's what, Nottingham Forest away, then Chelsea at home. It's not looking great. Then Southampton is great, Bournemouth is great,
Great.
Fulham.
Bournemouth is great.
No, it's not great.
I mean, he got a goal and
at
assist last time, but still, that's a tough fixture. Fulham as well is a tough fixture to break down.
Yeah, no, it's not looking good. And Fulham, and then City, and Villa, and then Crystal Palace, and then it's Leicester, Brentford, West Ham. No, see, it's. I think if I were you, in the sense of anyone who owns Juan Pedro, now's the time to sell because there are a lot of valid strikers that you can get, and you know,
I'd say the time to sell was a couple game weeks ago, but yeah.
yeah. I mean, I got rid
still.
of him, so
Yeah.
I mean, I got rid of him, and I'm very happy to have gotten rid of him. So
Same. But yeah, that is the manager of the week with 84 points. If anyone of you guys watching want to be manager of the week, you can join the FPL Scope Mini League with the league code hpxeri. And if you have the highest score in one particular game week, you'll get featured on the podcast, just like SMC just did, and is going to be to end the podcast as well. We're going to look at the plans for the next week for the manager and just talk a bit more about future plans and stuff with the manager of the week. But now let's leave Gameweek 23 behind us and let's look forward to the next few game weeks. Look at the fixture ticker because it is a pretty interesting fixture ticker as well now because we both have a double game week in Gameweek 24 as we've talked about for the last few weeks. We've been preparing for this week and now both of us have triple Liverpool with Trent, Salah and Gakpo in our own teams. So it's all about getting Liverpool players and then potentially Everton players as well if you have room for that for this game week. But we've talked a lot about that. We talked about like the best Everton Liverpool assets in their past podcasts and stuff. I rather want to look more forward now to Game Week 29, which is now on the board for the fixture ticker, looking ahead at the next, 5 game weeks. Because Game Week 29 is going to be a blank game week, and we still don't know fully yet which teams will blank. But currently, as it stands, at least among the bookmakers, the odds-on favorites to blank, to blank in Game Week 29 basically, are Liverpool playing against Aston Villa away, Crystal Palace playing against Newcastle away, and then Aston Villa, of course, playing at home to Liverpool, and Newcastle playing at home to Crystal Palace. Because this is with in mind that Newcastle save their 2-0 lead over Arsenal and go through to the final, and Liverpool also turn it back against Spurs after losing against Spurs this past the first leg, and that they will turn it around and win. That is the most likely turnout just now. So with all these fixtures in mind for your team, you actually have 8 players out from these teams, from Liverpool, Crystal Palace, Newcastle, and Aston Villa. You have 0 from Newcastle, triple Liverpool, triple Newcastle, and then 2 from Palace as well. So what are your like immediate thoughts on Game Week 29 and your plans? Because if you free hit that game week, you can obviously save it until Game Week 29 and just do a free hit then and not worry about it for too long. But if you're looking to do transfers there, you got to transfer out most of those players, or at least like 4 out of those 8 players, to have 4 players benched and 11 players starting basically for that game week. One of the players you have is Henderson, who is most likely going to blank in 29, and your backup goalkeeper would be Verbruggen, who you would have to start against Man City away, which is not ideal either. So what are your like first initial thoughts on Game Week 29 and what to do about it when that time comes?
Loaded question. I think it's one of those things where I could either free hit. I could potentially look to get rid of my Newcastle assets as well, because I do have 3, and looking
Yeah.
at their games, it's not looking good, bro. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that could be the easy sort of tangible there, because if I get rid of them, keep my Liverpool assets because they do still have a good run of games, and I don't have any Villa players.
Yeah.
I'm looking to get rid of Sar because he's a piece of shit, anyways. So it could be like getting in Wissa, Flecken, and getting rid of, say, Verbruggen, or yeah, it all depends on what feels more right. Because I think one of those things is like if Newcastle are still able to beat all these mega teams and all this type of stuff, then it's going to make my decision a lot more difficult. I believe in Alexander Isak all the way against all these teams because yeah, I just have that sort of belief in him. Do I have that belief in Hall and Gordon? Less so, I guess, in that regards. But yeah, I think selling those sort of assets will be okay. Keeping the Liverpool players and benching them for that. It's hard to even know whether Gakpo will survive past this double game week. I don't know because again, I feel like Gakpo is not someone who gets injured often, but it just feels like something that could stupidly happen. So with that in mind, I think it'll be easy to shift players out if that's the decision I make. But I think a free hit will look more likely.
Okay. Yeah, it's still a lot of ways to go, and we still don't know completely yet which teams are going to blank in 29. We'll know that before Game Week 25 deadline, because the League Cup second leg is between Game Week 24 and Game Week 25. So we'll get to know which teams are blanking in Game Week 29. And it could be if Arsenal managed to turn it around against Newcastle. We just saw Bournemouth beat Newcastle 4-1. Like, who's to say Arsenal can't do the same thing at St. James's Park? Maybe. If that happens, then Arsenal-Chelsea is the game that gets to be blank. And if Spurs somehow hold on to the lead against Liverpool, it's going to be Spurs against Fulham. That turns out to be a blank game week. But yeah, like I said, we were going to know this before the Game Week 25 deadline, basically. So I think we can discuss this more in detail next time when we actually see which teams are going to blank for sure. And we're also going to get some FA Cup results, I think, between that as well, and have a more clear picture of which teams could blank later on in the season as well. So I think you should just keep your patience in that regard and wait a little bit when it comes to what to do for Game Week 29, but keep it in mind for future transfers and stuff, because you don't want to bring in players that blank in 29. Like, you don't want to bring in Newcastle players this week, for example, even though the Fulham at home fixture is pretty enticing for someone like Lewis Hall. I wouldn't really advise buying Lewis Hall at this moment in time. Because of the fixtures and stuff. But yeah, speaking of the fixtures, we can see there down at the bottom, City, Newcastle, Brighton have pretty tough fixtures in general. And Nottingham Forest, some pretty popular FPL assets from those teams as well. So yeah, probably stay a bit clear from those teams in general. Up top, obviously, Everton, Liverpool. We know about their players. We have talked about that before, so I'm not sure we need to talk about that too much. But then we also have Brentford, who have a really nice favorable run of fixtures all the way up until Game Week 29, which if you are then free hitting in 29, it doesn't really matter that they play Bournemouth away because you can just free hit them out basically. But yeah, Brentford, is it just as simple as Mbuemo and Wissa? How do you feel about a double up and any other potential assets from Brentford in your mind? Like, those are the 3 questions I want answered. First and foremost, double up Wissa and Mbuemo. Do you like it? Do you prefer to just go with one?
No, I like it. I think it's it's a weird one because you like sort of guarantee your points because it's usually either one of those two that gets the big points. So having a double up of them when a lot of these other strikers are either gonna have difficult spells, like in the case of like a Chris Wood, Juan Pedro, Isak, and obviously Haaland in that case. Um, and even potentially Ollie Watkins, and obviously with do people really have Havertz? Like, I think it's favorable, and I think considering the fact that it's easier matches, you might as well have the double up. I don't think it's the worst double up, especially considering the fact that Wissa isn't that expensive.
Yeah.
So I would definitely be okay with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Any of the other teams? Obviously, Bournemouth are pretty much like the it factor team now in the Premier League. They have Liverpool at home now in Game24. So we're probably going to, again, talk more about them in next week's podcast. But initially, like if you were to rank Kluivert, Dango, and Semenyo as options now, both in terms of how they look and also in terms of price, I think Semenyo is 5.7, or Kluivert is 5.7, Semenyo is 5.6, if I'm not mistaken, and Dango is 5.0. How would you rank those three players if you were to rank them just now?
I mean, you just said it, right?
Which way? I forgot what I said.
You said, what was it? You said Kluivert. If I remember, you said Kluivert, Dango, and then Semenyo.
Okay.
I probably put Semenyo last because just form wise, he's a little bit hit and miss. I think Dango's been in really good form, and obviously Justin Kluivert is just red fucking hot. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he is very much looking like the talent we saw at Ajax, and he's sort of been like a journeyman, but he's finally found his home, and I think he's really making um, the Premier League its bitch right now. So it's really fun to see, and it's really cool when you know the IUs of the world and all this type of stuff when sons, you know, can eclipse. I'm not saying he's better than his dad, but like having these sort of moments is really cool to see. And as someone who's obviously known a Larson son as well. It's just fun to see when these guys get their moments and all this type of stuff. So I think Claver definitely number one simply because he's on penalties. I think
Yeah.
Dango's number two because he's a striker as well, so
Yeah.
he'll get more chances. And I think Semenyo, I would normally say higher than Dango, but his form has been really hit and miss. Like he's getting a goal and assist in like every other game and all this type of stuff, but I think these other guys are just you can't ignore what they're doing right now. So I'd go with them in that regards.
Yeah. I think that's fair enough, and that is pretty much the same order that I have them in, as you'll see now from the weekly wildcard draft that I've done for this week. So yeah, this is the wildcard draft that I've ended up on and the players that I've ended up on, and I actually have Wissa and Mbeumo, the double up, so I'm sort of answering my own questions here. I do like the double up with the Brentford players. I think they're going to be really good. They've shown all season that they can provide the goods, especially in home games, but yeah, with the fixtures that they have now, they're looking really, really good. And I've also gone with a triple up on Bournemouth. Not only do I have Kluivert ahead of Dango, and then Dango in the team as well, but I have Kluivert slightly higher rated at the number 7 pick compared to Dango at number 12. I also have Milos Kirkis in the defense for Bournemouth because he's been fantastic for a long time now. Kimo, as we saw, had him in his team. And he's just been terrific for a long time and getting points left, right, and center. So, yeah, I'm going to triple up on Bournemouth, double up on Brentford. I still actually have 2 Newcastle players. Obviously, Isak, I think he's worth keeping for the long haul. I don't think anyone should sell him in general. But how do you feel about Isak and his tougher fixtures? You said you were going to get rid of Newcastle players, but is Isak one you potentially would get rid of if you don't free hit in 29? Or is he just someone you want to hold through and bench in Game 29?
It's one of those things, right, where we'll have to sort of wait and see how these matches develop and all this type of things. But like, it's not the worst time to sell him, if that makes sense, considering the games and, I mean, God, they lost to Bournemouth sort of thing. Like it felt like a game they should be winning and all this type of stuff. And who's to say that they're able to keep up with the Man City and Liverpool's of the world? I fully expect them to beat Fulham. I fully expect them to get something against Nottingham Forest, and it's not in the realms of impossibility that he scores against all four teams. And because he's a striker and that's what he's meant to do,
Hmm.
it's easy to keep him in that regards. I feel Gordon and Hall, for example, much more likely for me to move. So
Yeah.
I think Isak could be a easy keep, and I feel like he's the type of striker. You know how how people benched Embuemo last week, sort of thing. He's going to be one of those that people bench and he'll end up scoring anyways.
Yeah.
It's sort of like when people benched Chris Wood against Liverpool. I was one of the managers who started him and
Hmm.
he scored. So
Yeah.
who's to say against Isak's ridiculous form right now that he can score against these teams? So
Yeah.
yeah, I think he's an easy keep,
Yeah.
especially with this form.
That's definitely what I think as well, seeing as I have him ranked as the number 3 most important player to have currently in FPL. So yeah, I think he's easy, someone you can keep, whether you're free hitting in 29 or not. You can just bench him in 29 if you still have him in your team. So yeah, I think he's going to be good for the entirety of the season. And also Newcastle, like they don't have the best fixtures running up to game week 29, but from game week 30 onwards, they're going to be fantastic, especially that they have a double in 33, most likely, if they do get the blank in 29. And then they also have good fixtures leading up to that and good fixtures after that as well in game week 34. So yeah, I think Newcastle are looking good long term, but not short term. They have some tough fixtures. That's why I've dropped Gordon. I've kept Hall barely. He's the number 14th pick. Just because I quite like the fixture against Fulham. Fulham didn't really look that good offensively against Man United. And also that I think he's someone that you could just have on your bench. And there's so many good defenders right now that I feel like you don't really need to start him most game weeks. So I think he's someone you can keep, especially if you bought him at like 4.4 and you have a lot of value tied into Hall. I think he's definitely someone you could potentially keep in general. But yeah, anything else that you notice about this team? Any players that you're missing, or any players that you wish were here, or any issues with the team, or anything you take note of?
No, I think long term, a lot of these players make sense, and I'm not too fussed that. I mean, you have two Everton defensive players, which is quite interesting to see. But yeah, we have 8 clean sheets for a reason. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it looks pretty solid. Fun to see a double up of Kluivert and Dango as well. I can't really hate on this in that. However, I have one question in why Cunha is on the cusp.
Cunha, I think, just again long term is going to be a good pick. He has a decent fixture now against Aston Villa at home, I think, this upcoming game week. And I think he's just like a nice. I have him currently in my own team, and I'm not looking to sell him because I think for the long haul, and especially if you're not free hitting in 29, if you look at the fixtures for Wolverhampton, that's when Wolverhampton has Southampton away. So for game 29, especially if you're not free hitting, I think Cunha is going to be a really nice player to just keep. Looking at their fixtures, Aston Villa at home, that's good. Liverpool and Bournemouth away, that's tough. But then Fulham, Everton at home, and then Southampton away. Like I think he's looking pretty good. So if you have good enough players to start in game 25 and 26, I think he's definitely someone to consider for the next few game weeks. So yeah, I think he's going to be a good pick eventually, and he's shown in the past this season. We both got to get the fruits of his labor when he scored several goals early in the season. And he's shown also in bigger games as well. That he can score earlier in the season as well. So yeah, I quite like Cunha in general. But I do think, like you can see, my strikers are ranked 3rd, 5th, and 9th. So I think all of them are really strong contenders. And Mateta as well, who dropped out. Took a lot for me to drop him out because I still like Mateta quite a lot. So there are a lot of good striker options. But I think Cunha is like my 4th or 5th-ish best target currently. But that sort of also leads me into the other thing, because the player that I haven't mentioned and that we have mentioned in the podcast and we're going to talk about now, leading into your team, that is Iliman Ndiaye, because he's the one you brought in. You had the money to bring in Wissa, but you decided to go for Iliman Ndiaye instead for Calvert-Lewin. So talk me a bit through that. How much faith do you have in Ndiaye? How did you like how he looked after Calvert-Lewin got subbed off as well? Especially also confirmed as the penalty taker now. Like, what led you to the decision to go with Ndiaye as your final striker for your team, basically?
Yeah, I mean, he is one of the things that me and you always like to talk about is having players with a little bit of X factor to them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Bukayo Saka, the Mateus Cunha, these sort of players who can create a lot of chances by themselves and can take the game and the reins of the game by themselves, and I think he's obviously that for us. I mean, really talented dribbler, can shoot with both feet, is our penalty taker as well now that Calvert-Lewin is confirmed to be out for a couple of games. I think that's what sort of made it possible. And instead of going, I'm not 100% sure I could do Wissa and my assistant manager uh, if I wanted to go for David Moyes, for example, but I can do NDI and David Moyes if I wanted to, for example. So
Yeah, you could do the
that's
most regardless though, regardless of who you pick as your striker.
no, in the sense that I don't think money wise I would have had enough to do both.
Ah, that's true. That's true.
So
Yeah,
this
you need the
gives
money in
me
the
the
bank.
freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this gives me the freedom to do both if I end up doing it. And I just like her. I definitely believe our chances against Leicester. I mean, yes, they did. Fucking Spurs. Yes, they did beat Spurs, but I still think like with our form and how we're playing lately and all this type of stuff that we're gonna be able to at the very least get a result there, and I believe he's gonna be one of the main key factors to that. And I also believe that he can do something against Liverpool as well. You know, I don't. I think. I mean, personally, he's gonna skin Trent. So, yeah, I just have belief in him. He looks always good in most games, and he's
Mm-hmm.
usually the one who gets us going. It's a shame that he won't be, um, you know, playing with Calvert Lewin, but I hope unless we sign someone or send Broja back to back to the Shadow Realm and get someone else. Like, I think it'll be Beto playing next to him, and I felt Beto was just like, maybe a bit too wild of a pick because we don't even know if he'll start or not.
Yeah, of course.
And we know that when both are on the pitch, it's still NDI who's or Skilliman who takes the penalties. So, yeah, I just felt like very comfortable with him as a pick, and I
Yep.
think it's yeah, it gives me the space for the assistant manager if it ends up being David Moyes, which feels like it might be.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't actually thought about the money aspect, like the assistant manager thing. I sort of like disregard the money that it takes, but you actually need to save money to or have enough money in the bank to do that transfer. So yeah, that's actually a really good point that I didn't think about even. But the other thing that's sort of like I'm not really worried. I think NDI is a good pick. I don't think he's like that bad, even though I didn't have him in my own wildcard drafts. But my one worry about it is the fact that your history with Everton players this season has been pretty atrocious. Now, even just this past game week, bringing in Calvert-Lewin and him getting injured straight away. So now having Mikolenko already, getting Ndiaye, and then potentially getting David Moyes. Are you scared that you will jinx Everton, or do you think they will finally break the curse now?
No such thing. I mean, technically, I had Calvert Lewin, and we still ended up winning. So
Yeah,
for
you did.
me, and it's just, I mean, I like if the system manager was available last week, I would have done it last week, sort of thing. That's the sort of belief I had, and the reason why I brought Calvert Lewin in the first place, because Calvert Lewin's been
Mm-hmm.
a fucking trap all season. So he's the reason why I didn't have Chris Wood from the get go.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't think I think it's silly to believe in these sort of curses and stuff like that. In regards to that, I mean, I will privately tell you like, oh, what the fuck did I do? But I think it's just one of those things where I just have belief in them, and it is to a fault, of course, because I might have gone with someone else. But I also just think that we're in a really good spell at the moment. Leicester is a huge game for relegation reasons, so I think even if we somehow, don't draw or win against Liverpool, it's not the end of the world because we picked up what 9 points in a row, which would be amazing considering Everton's current, points tally and all this type of stuff. So for me, yeah, I believe in David Moyes. He's looked real like we've looked so much better again. I'm gonna keep saying this every podcast, but we could have gone in more against Aston Villa if fucking Calvert Lewin sort out his shooting boots, and of course he sorts out his shooting boots the game week I don't have him and gets injured the game week I do have him. So you know what? Mikolenko's always been providing the points, even when they
Yeah.
have started him and all this type of stuff. And I gotta have some belief in them. And I know that a lot of people will have Mikolenko. Some people will be gutsy enough to go with NDI. Others will go for Wissa or whatever striker, or even get in Justin Kluivert and all this type of stuff. But I feel the Bournemouth assets can wait a week, and obviously the Everton ones I should bring in now, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I would have brought in a midfielder if there was someone like if McNeil hadn't had this knee thing, put him back some more. I would have brought him in because I think he's great. I would have like 2 years ago brought in Decore, but he's so up and down lately. Like sometimes he can't even manage to. He plays as how badly as people think Lukaku plays, which is terrible considering the fact that Lukaku scored against both Atalanta and Juventus. So go fuck yourself, everyone. And yeah, so it's just a bit annoying that he hasn't really found his form. But classic him, final game day of the year, he'll probably score a bagger again like he did a year ago. So yeah, I just have belief in Everton. Not enough belief to go for a midfielder as well. If there was like a clear like, if Jesper Lindstrom had played sort of how he did with Frankfurt, 100% would have brought him in. But now he's playing like in his Napoli form, where he doesn't score or doesn't get an assist, nothing. He's just there, which is a bit frustrating. And Jack Harrison has been disappointing to say the least. So, and keeps missing big chances. So, I feel, for the time being, with everything in mind, this feels like an easy transfer. I'm a bit annoyed because I think I missed it's 0.9 rather than 1.0 because I did miss that he went up in price. Because I could have gone him for the same price as Calvert-Lewin, so I wouldn't have lost the 0.1. Considering I have 0.9 anyways, it's fine in that regard.
You still have enough for, like, it doesn't affect your assistant manager chip either, because you still have enough for the 0.5 and 0.8 managers, and you wouldn't have had 1.1 manager allowance anyway, even if you did it early. So yeah, it doesn't really matter that much in general. But yeah, going a bit back to the thing with your team as well. I didn't even think about Lewis, who sort of lost his place with City. So it's kind of 9 players that you need to replace before, or like 5 out of the 9 players, I guess, you need to replace until blank Gameweek 29 if you don't want to use free hit. So that would take up all 5 of your free transfers that you have from now until Gameweek 29 if you want to change your team for that. So yeah, something to keep in mind for future game weeks for sure. But we'll get more into it as we get closer to Gameweek 29 as well. So not going to dwell too much on that for this podcast basically. But let's move on to Kimo and his current plans for Gameweek 24. I haven't really asked him, but these are just my suggestions. And it is very confusing looking at potential transfers because there's a lot of things you can do, but a lot of things you can't do as well in terms of the transfers. So I'm going to try to explain it quickly before I get your input on what you would do. So basically, Kimo has 1 Liverpool player, and he has Mikolenko from Everton. I don't think there's any other super obvious Everton candidates apart from maybe up front. Maybe you want to go with NDIA like Kevin has done. But in terms of getting Liverpool players, there are 2 options. I think one, the easiest option, I think, if you want to get the Gakpo, Salah, Trent triple up, you sell Watkins for Gakpo, and that gives you enough money to do Gabriel to Trent. Or you can do Wood to Gakpo and still have enough money to do Gordon to Szoboszlai, because Szoboszlai would be a bit of a differential player there. Or you can do Gordon to Szoboszlai and get Trent for Gabriel as well. So if you do the Szoboszlai move, you have a choice between Gakpo in for Wood or Trent in for Gabriel. But if you don't, you have to sell Watkins to bring in Trent, basically. And you can do one of these transfers and have just 2 Liverpool players, and you can also activate the assistant manager chip. So there's a lot of different things Kimo can do here. But I think getting at least 1 and then potentially assistant manager Liverpool assets, or because also I have to think about that as well, the money, because slot is worth 1.5. So I think Watkins to Wood. I'm not quite sure actually. I should actually double check that. But yeah, I think Watkins to Gakpo. Yeah, Watkins to Gakpo could be enough to bring him in slot. But yeah, most likely it's going to be 2 Liverpool players in to make sure that you have triple Liverpool for this game week for Kimo. But all that in mind, a bit convoluted, a bit confusing. What would you do in terms of the transfers? Like, what two transfers or one transfer would you do to bring in Liverpool players for Kimo's team, do you think?
Yeah, I think Watkins was, if we quickly go back to the fixture ticker, I think
Is Ipswich
the
at
fixture
home in
ticker,
25, which is nice, but
yeah,
oh
because like,
yeah, Ipswich at home.
yeah. Um, so I feel like Watkins probably survives longer than Wood. I mean, I think Wood's game isn't the worst, but long term, it looks a lot worse. So
Yeah.
I think Gakpo needs to come in because he is a quality baller, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously it will be running on form and all this type of stuff, and he is very streaky like that. So I would say Gakpo is a necessity. The
Okay.
question is then whether I rate Soboslai higher than Trent.
Like
Soboslai
if
is,
you do want Wood to Gakpo, you don't have enough money for Gabriel to Trent. Is the
yeah,
thing.
but you could get Konate instead.
Yeah, that's what you mentioned as well. So that's also something I
Yeah,
want to talk about because Konate, he is like sort of ish, like he's back obviously, but he is also injury prone and also I think Slot
of
said something
course.
to the effect that he can't play three games in 1 week, seeing as they have the second leg in the cup as well on top of the two matches in 24. So I'm just a bit unsure if you can get Konate, and if you want to do Gabriel to Konate especially as well, maybe if you can do like yeah, I think his defense is pretty good. Other than that, I think Mikolenko, Kirkis, and Robinson are pretty good like long-term picks
Yeah.
in general. So I'm not sure if I would sell Gabriel to bring in Konate. Like I think I would have to get Trent to sell Gabriel because I still think Gabriel is a good choice. Like I still think he's good, kind of like Watkins. Like I don't feel good about selling Watkins, but it potentially has to be done to get the best Liverpool players potentially. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe Konate, that's another potential transfer for him. So yeah, keep going. What transfers do you think you would probably do then to bring in Liverpool players?
Yeah,
Wood to Gakpo?
I think Wood to Gakpo seems more obvious to me in the sense that I think Wood long term is gonna start blanking again, and
Mm-hmm.
2 pointer to a 16 pointer in Gakpo last week makes me feel very justified. So
Yeah,
yeah,
but
I
that
think personally,
that costs money though. Like you need some extra money in the bank for that to work.
yeah,
The difference now is Gakpo is 7.6 and Wood is 7.1.
yeah,
So seeing as Kimo has 0.0 in the bank, you will have to do something else, which could be Gordon to Soboslai, or you could just go away from that in general. Maybe, I don't know. What else would you do then? Maybe Gabriel to Konate could work to get the funds to do Wood to Gakpo. I haven't checked that for Kimo. I can
mhm.
actually check that. But yeah. So yeah, what do you think then in general with the money in mind as well?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think Gakpo. I think Gakpo is 100% like the has to be on the priority list because he's just too good to ignore in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he has to somehow bring in Gakpo, whether that's to bring in Sobos. How much is Soboslai Gordon? What's the difference there?
I
Not
think you
much,
earn
right?
like 1.3 or something. I think Gordon is like mid, like high 6 point something, and then Soboslai, I'm not quite sure entirely. But you get enough
Okay,
money.
let me go.
I did the transfers, and you get enough money to do either Gabriel to Trent or Wood to Gakpo if you do Gordon to Soboslai. But obviously
Okay,
not both.
yeah, yeah. I would, yeah, I think Gakpo. Well, you could potentially even do like a. Could you potentially do like a Gakpo in? I think Gakpo in is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Whether he then does another Liverpool asset becomes the question. Whether it's Gabriel to Konate, or does he future-proof and bench someone, like for example, bringing in Dango or someone like that instead,
Mm-hmm.
and
Could do that as
benching
well.
them and play Rodgers against Wolves away, for example. All depends on what the necessity is for the future as well. because I do understand that eventually you might have to get rid of your Liverpool players, and you don't want to have an over reliance on teams either. But if you want to aim for the double game week, try and get as many players as you can. And
Yeah.
yeah,
He can do Wood to Gakpo and Gordon to Dango, and then have enough money to get Slot in as the assistant manager if he wants to. Or he can go with Moyes as assistant manager as well for that chip. But then that would leave him with only 2 Liverpool assets, I guess.
but I assume he's going to triple captain this week, right? Like most of you.
That's the thing. That's the second question I was going to ask you, because that's sort of like my feeling when it comes to Kimo. Like personally, if I was in his shoes, I'm going to use the triple captaincy chip myself as well. But I know Kimo quite well, and in terms of his triple captaincy preferences, and usually in the past,
Kevin De Bruyne.
he's but he got a lot of points from that. He's still going to remind us about that. But he kind of likes to go a bit differential when it comes to triple captain, and he also kind of likes to save the chip until Gameweek 38 as well. So I'm not quite sure if he's going to use the triple captaincy chip, and that's why I've sort of kind of liked the whole Wood to Gakpo, Gordon to Szoboszlai thing, and just hope that Szoboszlai and Gakpo continue scoring the goals and Salah basically blanks. Because if you don't triple captain Salah, you basically need him to not score, because you're going to lose points in total if he does well, and if you haven't triple captained him. So that's sort of why the Gakpo and Szoboszlai route would be kind of interesting, because then you can hope for other players than Salah to get the points offensively and sort of go all out for that. But yeah, I think personally, to give my own input here, I think I would just do Wood to, or Watkins to Gakpo and Gabriel to Trent. I think I would lean towards that, just because I like those picks long term as well. Like I think they're pretty good picks. Szoboszlai would just be like a 1 week punt or 2 week punt, because they have Wolves at home next week kind of guy. But he has been a bit more offensive, or quite a lot more offensive the last few game weeks, Szoboszlai. So I don't think he's the worst pick either. I think he's a bit not under talked about, especially for just like a quick turnaround here, Szoboszlai. So yeah, there's so many different ways he can sort this out, and yeah, I hadn't really thought too much about the assistant manager price, but obviously you have to take that into account as well. But could just use Moyes as assistant manager anyway. If it does do the Gakpo Szoboszlai move, he actually has enough for Moyes as well as the assistant manager if it does those 2 moves. Gakpo and Szoboszlai. I can also check the other option potentially of getting Trent in for Gabriel and see if he has enough money in that regard. If he also does Watkins to Wood, or Watkins to Gakpo. Let me see. But yeah, just in general as well, his team. Anything else? No, he has 0.2 if he does the Wood to Gakpo, Gabriel to Trent move, so he doesn't have enough for Moyes on top of that. But honestly, I think even if you're not playing triple captain this week, I don't think assistant manager is probably the best use of transfer. Moyes potentially, but yeah, I don't know. So yeah, I don't know if anything we can clear out of that. But he also has Rodgers on the bench against Wolves away. I think that's a pretty good fixture. So like you said, you could buy Dango and just bench him and start Rodgers, who has a decent fixture against Wolves at least, and then wait for future game weeks basically. So yeah, that might be the best idea. So yeah, after all that blabber from me, what do you think is your final determination for Kimo? What would you do in his place?
I think bringing in Gakpo has to be the priority right now.
Yeah.
Out of the 3 that we've mentioned here, I think Gakpo is the priority, simply because I can see Liverpool conceding in both games,
Yeah.
And
Can you see them scoring in both games though?
Of course. Sadly, of course.
These tough games.
Yeah, I mean, if Bournemouth managed to shut them out, they're the most legitness of all time, sort of thing,
Yeah.
And if Everton shut them out, I'll fucking break my entire apartment just out of jubilation. So, yeah, it's just one of those things where I think the attacking teams or the attacking players right now are so strong, and obviously, with the Champions League tonight, I reckon we'll see a lot of rotation from them because they have no real reason to, unless they're scared that Barcelona will take the first place, which I think we technically could if Liverpool somehow lose, which again, very, very unlikely event, because Who are they playing again? Playing PSV away. Okay. That's not like the easiest game, but
Yeah.
again, like I reckon all these assets will be fine and all this type of stuff. So getting Gakpo in somehow is my priority, I'd say.
Yeah. So then if he
So this,
does Watkins to Gakpo, he can do for free or doesn't cost,
yeah,
or he saves money from that. Wood to Gakpo,
yeah,
he would have to do something else. But that could be, like you mentioned, I think that's also a good solution there. Wood to Gakpo and Gordon to Dango, and then bench Dango for Rogers could be the best idea as well. And yeah, that maybe. But I kind of
yeah.
like the Soboslai pick as well, and I also like Trent. But I think selling Gabriel is also kind of tough. But yeah, we don't have to get too much into that as well for this this podcast. But yeah, let's move on to the manager of the week. And here I have actually activated the triple captaincy chip on Salah because personally, I think that's the best idea to do if you have triple captaincy left, and especially if you have all the other chips left and you have so many, like you only have so many game weeks left to use them in, especially for the double game weeks. I think it makes sense to use triple captaincy chip here, but I'd like your thoughts. You're obviously a bit more unbiased, I guess, in this regard because you've already used your triple captaincy to great effect. So for you, it doesn't really matter as much. So what do you think? If you had triple captain left, would you use it now on Salah or would you save it for later as well? Or what do you feel about Salah as a triple captaincy option against Bournemouth and Everton away? Like, how do you feel he'll do in these two matches in total?
Yeah. Um,
Because he has, what, 2 goals in the last 4 games in total? 2 goals, 0 assists in the last 4 Premier League games. He's not like in red
so,
hot form anymore either. And
so,
Bournemouth, yeah, go on.
if I remember correctly, it was like what? Yes, 7 goals and assists in 11 against Everton, and I think it was like 9 goals and 2 assists in the same amount of games against Bournemouth. So like,
Despite
these are
despite the 0 goals and the 8-0 win that they
yeah,
had.
of course. It it's it seems like, of course, these are two teams now that are sorting their shit out and all this
Yeah.
type of stuff, and a lot of this to consider. But at the end of the day, is there a better team than this Liverpool side to start losing your form against? No, like this is a legit Liverpool side. Salah is obviously in the form of his life. He's trying to win the Ballon d'Or over Rafinha and some of these other boys who are doing really well in their respective leagues and stuff. So, um, yeah, I think it's just one of those things where I think if I hadn't used it on Haaland to great effect against shitty Ipswich, um, I would have probably used it this week. So I completely understand everyone. I'm hoping to God it fails, even though I'm going to be captaining Salah as a counterweight in case it does go well,
Yeah.
because I still get
I
Salah
mean,
points. Of course, I'll lose out, but
you
you
have to
know,
captain him though. Or like
yeah,
triple captain or not, it's a question. But captaincy, like he's pretty standout. Unless you want to go like super differential with Gakpo or a Trent something or something like that, or Ndiaye in your case potentially. Then yeah, you have to sort of captain him. But yeah, yeah. Well, as you were saying, continue. Sorry.
yeah. That being said, like I feel like everyone who didn't, unless you were one of those assholes who triple captain Holland against Southampton when he only scored a goal, like yeah, this has to be the game week you do it, unless you really want to do the Kimo thing of saving it until the very end or waiting for the other double game weeks that also exist. And there are some favorable teams to have or use it on. Considering Salah's form, considering Liverpool's form in general as well, yes, it's been a little bit up and down, but they're still getting the goals and the assists, and Salah's that guy when it comes to FPL right now. So you got to go with him, I'd say,
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah. When it comes to the transfers for the manager of the week, what I have proposed is to sell Guardiola to get Mikolenko. That will give you enough money to go from Joao Pedro to Gakpo, because yes, you could sell Wood for Gakpo. That would probably be the easier choice. But I think just getting rid of Joao Pedro, especially seeing as Wood has Brighton at home, like he can get a lot of points in that game as well. I just don't feel like too comfortable selling Wood. this game week, and I think Joe Pedro is more like on the chopping block, especially considering his fixtures. So that's one option, selling Guardiola for Mykolenko and then Joe Pedro to Gakpo. Another option is if you downgrade, if you use all three free transfers left, and you downgrade Gordon all the way down to Ethan Nwaneri from Arsenal, who's going to play quite a bit the next few game weeks. That gives you enough money to do Guardiola to Trent and Joe Pedro to Gakpo at the same time. So yeah, out of those two different variations of transfers, what do you think is your preferred option out of the two?
Ooh. Hmm.
Tough decision, clearly.
Yeah. Shit.
Because if you do the Guardiola to Mykolenko, Joe Pedro to Gakpo thing, again, you'll only have two Liverpool players. You'd lack that final Liverpool spot. You could also always, like, you could do Guardiola to Konate rather than Mykolenko. No, maybe not. I don't know. I don't think you get enough money actually from doing that. I think you need to do down to Mykolenko to bring in Gakpo for Joe Pedro, but you could also always sell Wood, I guess. So again, a lot of variations to how you can afford getting Gakpo, but I don't know what you think.
Because you could technically do Mykolenko. Because like you could, yeah, I would probably get rid of Chris Wood.
Okay.
And get Gakpo in. Chris Wood, Gakpo, Colwell to
Konate?
Colwell to Mykolenko. Would that be, and maybe another transfer to because I would have said Pedro too. I like the look of Guardiola, that's the thing.
Could also do Joe Pedro to Mykolenko or to Iliman, of course, like you did.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't suggest against it. It's just a question of, I think Wissa is looking very nice as well. So it's just a question of whether they want Wissa in at some point. And to do that, you can't basically bring in Gakpo. You'd have to do some changes here and there. So
and with the Wissa goes works out next week anyway, or this week.
Yeah, of course.
Could do that on top of everything, but yeah.
Yeah, but I think Gak, again, for anyone who didn't already get Gakpo in, yeah, idiots. You should be trying to get him in, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Gakpo, yeah, I think maybe, unfortunately, you would get rid of Guardiola to do this.
Yeah, because that's what I wanted to ask you as well in terms of Guardiola, him as a pick in general. After seeing his performance against Chelsea, how he was basically an attacker in that game, how do you feel about Guardiola? Obviously, the fixtures aren't the best or are terrible. If you look at the fixture ticker, they're bottom.
Yeah.
Arsenal away, Newcastle at home, Liverpool at home, Spurs away, Nottingham Forest away. Most of these games, you expect Man City and their poorest defense to concede at least. And then you need Guardiola to step up and score a lot of goals. And he has done so far this season, but I don't know. But he did play really attacking football this past game week. So what do you feel about Guardiola as a pick in general? Is he someone that you would easily sell with the fixtures in mind, or is he someone that would be a reluctant sell at this point?
I think it'd be a reluctant sell, but considering the trade up that you get is you get an Everton who have favorable matches, you get a Liverpool who are the best team in the league, so it's not the worst thing in the world, but it would sting because Guardiola's playing how a lot of people expected him in the start of the season, because I remember Guardiola was a very popular pick in the beginning, and he was doing what he did against Chelsea in a lot of games where he just make these crazy marauding runs. So it'd be a reluctant sell, but I think it's the way to go.
Yeah. Because I think also the fact that Rico Lewis has just gotten out of the lineup, I think that's opened up a couple of things for Guardiola. I think he's more able to go forward now. So I still think he's a decent player to have. And I don't know. I was a bit unsure when I did look at him and potentially selling him, both him and Gabriel. I don't quite like selling either of them, honestly. But it just depends how much you value double game weeks and stuff.
I mean, you could. I mean, to free up space, sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah,
like to
go
free
ahead.
up space, something you could do is also getting rid of Gordon, potentially.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned earlier. With Gordon down
Yeah.
to Waneri, you have enough money to do Guardiola to Trent
Yeah.
and Pedro to Gakpo.
Yeah. I think that is another way of doing it. And wait, could you do Mikolenko, Colwell, Pedro, Gakpo, and Gordon to Ranieri, for example?
Yeah, or even if you want to double up on Bournemouth midfielders, you could probably go Kluivert with that as well. I think because Mikolenko
There
is
you
cheaper
go.
than Colwell. Did you say Pedro to Gakpo or Wood to Gakpo in that instance?
Oh, because no, then you go Pedro to Gakpo and then just make Wood into Wissa the week after.
Hmm. It depends a bit on the money, but that could be worked out if I just think about it like in context. Like, because Gordon is like what 6.3 or something, 6.5 ish. So that would save around 1 million to go to Kluivert. Colwell
What?
to Mikolenko would save you like zero point 0.2 or something. So, and with the 0.6 in the bank, I think you would have enough to do Pedro to Gakpo on top of that
Brother,
potentially.
Gordon is 7.7.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, even more so. You could definitely then do
Yeah.
Gordon to Kluivert, Colville to
Yeah.
Mikolenko,
Well, depends when this person bought
and Joao Pedro to Gakpo.
uh Gordon because he went up by like 2.2
Yeah, he is. That's what I
from
was thinking
Spurs to
more.
Wolves.
He
Yeah.
used to be cheaper, so he's gone up in price
Yeah.
quite a bit over the
Yeah.
weeks. But yeah, there's definitely things to consider. But it seems like in general, like your thoughts are, Gakpo is like the main priority. Konate is a fine option in Liverpool defense potentially. But Mikolenko as well, if you don't have him already, is probably an even better pick as someone you can trust to play in both games and is cheaper.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely a lot of things to consider in general, and 3 free transfers, so quite a few things you can do with this team. Looking at this team as well, you have double Newcastle, you have 1 Liverpool only, no Aston Villa, and no Crystal Palace. So this is a team that I think is like in better shape to not free hit in 29. And just have a team that is ready to play, because there's quite a lot of players here that actually do play, or like every single player here actually plays. Even the 2 goalkeepers still are the starting goalkeepers. Colwell, for how bad of a FPL pick I think is, still plays at least. So yeah, could keep that in mind as well. Could also start Colwell over Martinez, but after getting 15 points from Martinez last week, I figured just go for that. Same with Adenori as well. I don't know. I think Colwell is just a pretty terrible pick in FPL because he doesn't really have much goal threat, and Chelsea just concede every single game. So, yeah,
Yep.
that's my thoughts about him in general. But, anyways, I think that's enough for this podcast. And I thank you for joining me. And as always, as always, I can remind people that if you want to be Manager of the Week, you can join the FPL Scope Mini League with the league code hpxeri, and you can be featured on the podcast just like SMC just was. And that's it for the podcast for today, except for the final word, which goes to Kevin, as always, as is tradition on this podcast. So, Kevin, what do you have to say for yourself before we end the podcast?
Fuck Liverpool.